Are you ready to take your Whirlwind Barbarian to the next level? How about clearing a tier 8 in the Infernal Hordes, while still getting over 700 ether? I have the build for you. One of my friends put this build together, and I'm going to highlight it for you. We're going to go over everything that you need to know to clear tier 8. Before we hop into this is an end game build. This is not a starter build. It's not even a mid game build. This requires great gear, amazing master working rolls, and tempers. You can run this build without those, but it won't perform like you're going to see. I'm going to show you some clips from his tier 8 clear, and then we're going to go for the planner. Before we hop into the clips, this is his channel page right here. Make sure you head over, subscribe. He is going to put some great Barbarian content together this season. He's always on great builds. They're a lot of fun to play. They're always very, very strong. Let's hop into the clips. And let's take a look. So a couple of things I want you guys to see here. If you look on the screen right here, you look at his berserking. Berserking falls off very, very slowly because he's got a ton of duration. It's going to be built into the Paragon board. While he's running through this is not built around movement speed. He's still going to be moving very quickly, but the cooldown is very, very fast because of the endgame gear. Berserking stays up so much that you actually don't need to run anger management here. That makes it really, really cool because then you can actually swap in a different aspect and get a little bit more damage, a little bit more survivability. So this is what it looks like to run one of the waves. We're on wave 8 right now. Starting off these boss fights, the closer that you can keep the monsters together, it's going to be better. It's going to generate more fury. You're going to have Berserking up longer. Dustdevils are going to do damage to the monsters in a group. So it's going to be way better to try and keep them grouped up. In any of the ones where you have all three of them together, the boss fight's going to be very, very quick. It will also allow Whirlwind to continue to hit things. All of his buffs, if you look at them, they are staying up almost constantly. There's very, very little downtime with any of his shouts, any of his buffs, and Berserking never falls off. Alright, we're going to break down the build. Alright, I got the planner all set up. We're going to go over it so that we can break down exactly how this runs. In the same fashion that I normally do all of my build guides, we're going to start with the skills here. So when you're using the website here, if you just hit this little arrows here, that makes it a world of difference. You can see everything really, really well here. So for the build, we want 1 point into Lunging Strike and 1 point into Enhanced Lunging Strike. Whirlwind is not going to be most of the damage, but it is going to be big damage. And we'll show you a couple of the little clips and that we had some freeze frames. He was hitting very, very hard. We're going to do 1 point into Enhanced Whirlwind, and then we're going to do 1 point into Furious Whirlwind. We're going to do 1 point into Pressure Point. He went 3 points into Imposing Presence for life. As you know, we lost the tempers here, so anywhere with that we can gain max life is going to be really key in this season. 3 points into Martial Vigor. This is going to give us damage reduction from elites. We're going to do 1 point into Rallying Cry, into Enhanced Rallying Cry, all the way down through Strategic Rallying Cry. This is going to be a source of Fortify that we're going to get. It's also going to be a little bit of movement speed from Rallying Cry and a source of Unstoppable. We're going to be taking Iron Skin all the way down through your Tactical Iron Skin. This is going to give Iron Skin a barrier that it's going to give us, and it's also going to let us heal a little bit when we use Iron Skin. 1 point into Challenging Shout, and then 1 point into Enhanced Challenging Shout. This is going to give us 20% bonus max life. Remember, when we were watching that clip, the shouts were pretty much always up, so we're always going to be running 20% more max life. Coming down, we're going to put 5 points into Warcry. We need to get as much damage as we possibly can in order to maximize the amount of ether that we're getting in these high tiers of the Infernal Hordes. We're going to go all the way down through Power Warcry. This is going to give us an additional 10% increased damage when there's more than 6 monsters. And if you guys have ever done the Infernal Hordes, there is always more than 6 monsters around you. We're going to do 3 points into Booming Voice. This is going to increase the duration of all of our shouts. We're going to do 3 points into Raid Leader. This is pretty big here. This is going to give us a passive heal every time that one of our shouts are active. We always are going to have shouts active, so we're always going to be healing for 3% of our maximum life per second. We're going to do Guttural Yell. This again, whenever we shout, monsters around us deal 12% less damage. That's pretty big. and their shouts are going to be always up. We're always going to have these in order to do that little less damage from the monsters. 3 points into aggressive resistance. As you saw, we were always berserking, and that was even without anger management. That's going to give us 12% damage reduction while berserking. We're going to do 3 points into Pit Fighter. This is a 9x multiplier for damage to close enemies. Also gives us some damage reduction from distant enemies, which we don't have much of. That, in conjunction with all of the Uber Uniques that we're going to be running, is going to give us a lot of extra damage from all of those monsters that don't want to come that we have to run to. Slaying Strikes. The monsters in the Infernal Hordes in Tier 8 start to get a lot more life. When we get below 35% life, that's where the injured enemy state is. We're going to do 24x more damage. It's going to affect our Dustdevils, it's going to affect our Whirlwind. We're going to do 1 point into Thick Skin, and then we're going to do 3 points into Counteroffensive. This is going to give us an additional 12x damage when we're over 50% fortified. We're going to have our shouts up constantly, which means that we can always use Rallying Cry, which is going to give us Fortify. So even if our life dips for a little bit, we can use Rallying Cry again, get our Fortify back immediately, so we're always going to have Counteroffensive up. We're going to take Call of the Ancients. We're going to go all the way through Supreme Call of the Ancients. So why Call of the Ancients? Why not run Wrath of Berserker? It's more damage. When we get into the gear section of this, you're going to see exactly why, because this will be up all the time. We're going to have 20% increased attack speed and 25% increased damage while this is active. That is quite a lot, and the attack speed scales with Whirlwind. The more attack speed we have, the faster Whirlwind goes. We're going to do 3 points into Wallop. When you're using a bludgeoning weapon, the skills are going to deal 15% increased damage to stunned or vulnerable enemies. We're going to have a lot of vulnerable, and we're going to have a lot of stun. We're also going to do 2 points into Concussion. Skills using a bludgeoning weapon have a chance to stun enemies for 2 seconds. And for the final point, we're going to be running Unconstrained. This is going to give us up to 60% increased damage. Now this says 35% damage bonus, but we get 25% already from Berserking. So we get that 25% from Berserking plus the additional 35% bonus. And so now we're going to be doing 60% increased damage instead of the original 25. That's the skill tree. Let's go over the Paragon board. So hopping into the Paragon board, again, you can expand. This build is going to take as much life as we can. So we're going to stack life in the starter board. We're going to be taking Exploit. Every time that we damage an enemy, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. It can only happen once every 20 seconds. Moving up, we're going to be going into the Decimator board. Every time that we make an enemy vulnerable, the damage is increased by 10% X for 5 seconds. Whirlwind doesn't overpower, but we're still going to get that extra 10% X damage here. Inside of this board, we're going to be running Martial. Every time that we cast a shout, we're going to reduce the cooldowns of our non-shout skills. So we're going to be reducing the cooldown of Iron Skin, which is also very, very important. Iron Skin is going to be our lifeblood here. Coming over, we're going to be going into the Carnage board. In this board, we're going to be running Ambidextrous. This is going to give us an 8x increased damage while wielding a one-handed weapon. And we're going to be doing one-handed weapons here. Moving over into the Warbringer board, we're going to be doing Twister. This is going to give us damage to our Dustdevils. It's just additive, but every time that we use a Dustdevil, we gain 13% increased multiplicative damage. Coming up, we're going to go into the Blood Rage node. This right here, now killing a bleeding enemy has a 10% chance to grant Berserking for 5 seconds. You can see it going off in the gameplay, but because Berserk is up for so long, we don't actually need to worry about that part. Your damage is increased by 10% of your damage while Berserking bonus up to a maximum of 30%. If you go into your stat line, you scroll down to the bottom, you're going to see it says damage while Berserking. If that says 300%, you're getting the maximum bonus here. If it doesn't say that and it says more, that's okay. You're still getting additive damage to that. It's just not giving this legendary node any more benefit. If you're under, you're going to want to try and find a way to get your gear up into masterworking or get your tempers running so that you get to this number, because that's going to maximize this. We're min-maxing this board here. inside of this board, we're going to be running Ire. The big part about this, we're going to get a little bit of damage while berserking bonus, which is going to help this legendary node here. But we're also going to get 10% damage reduction from elites while berserking. And then heading up into your final board, this is going to be your Bonebreaker board. Inside of this board, we're going to be running Wrath. Because this is going to run the Grandfather, we put a little bit more points into here to get a little bit more critical strike damage. This also is going to generate Fury every time that we critical strike. We're going to run a lot of critical strike chance, so we're always going to be generating Fury. That Fury is only 3, but it also gets run through every single Fury generation that we have. So if we have 100% Fury generation, which we probably won't have quite that much, but you'll get 6 Fury per hit. Now think about all of the times that Whirlwind crits as we're spinning. We're spinning faster than ever. This is going to generate a ton of Fury. That's the Paragon board. We're going to look at the gear. This is where it's going to get really fun, but also very expensive and a little bit farmy because we have to make sure that you're running the bosses. Okay, so the gear. If you saw, we're going to be running a pretty big array of Uber uniques. Not only that, we're also going to run a couple of different uniques. We're going to look at the gear stats. And we'll go over the masterworking crits and everything that you're going to need here. On Mobalytics, unfortunately, right now, we can't put the masterworking crits into the uniques yet. It's coming, but we'll talk about it in this video. For the helmet, we're going to be running the Harlequin's Crest. You're going to want to put at least 2 points into that cooldown reduction. If you can get 3 into the cooldown reduction, that's going to be great, but maximum resources is actually not a bad place to go into. We're going to be running a Rob Lodney's, and we want to be running maximum resources here. We'll talk about that when we get to it, though. For the chest piece, we're going to be running Tyrael's Might. In this here, you can put 2 points into damage reduction and 1 masterworking crit into all resistances above the maximum if you want. You can go 3 points into damage reduction, whatever you can get, but those 2. The maximum resistance and then the damage reduction are going to be the most important ones for your masterworking crits. For the amulet, we're going to be running Fierce Winds. Your shout skills create 3 Dustdevils that deal damage to enemies. So your Dustdevils also are going to be up to 20% bigger, and they're going to deal 1% increased damage for each 1% of their size. What that means, we already get 20% increased size. That means that our Dustdevils are going to be dealing 20% increased multiplicative damage. When we add more size to this Dustdevil, then it gets more multiplicative damage. Running size on your weapons over damage is going to be really important for this because we're going to get multiplicative instead of additive damage. For the affixes here, we're going to be running critical strike chance, cooldown reduction, and then ranks to counteroffensive. When you saw in the skill tree, we're running counteroffensive 3 points. We're always going to be fortified because of how quickly our shouts come up. So counteroffensive is going to give us an incredibly strong boost to damage here. For the tempers, we're going to be running critical strike damage, Warcry cooldown reduction. For the gloves, we're going to be running aspect of elements. This gives you 7 seconds of 30% increased damage while your physical side is up. So when we have a fire, lightning, and physical, then we're getting our damage bonus. When the cold, poison, and shadow is up, we don't get any bonus at all. To look for the buffs, on your bar, you're going to see a sun. When you see the sun, we're getting all of our damage. When you see the moon, we're not getting anything. For the ring, we're going to be running the Ring of Starless Sky. This is insane this season. It was great last season, it got even better this season. For your masterworking crits here, put it all into critical strike chance. We want to be critting as much as we possibly can. What the Ring of Starless Sky does that is amazing is that it reduces the resource cost reduction by up to 50%. You lose half of what Whirlwind costs. That is really big. It also, on top of that 50% reduction on cost, gives you a 50x multiplier to your damage. There is really no other piece of gear out there that is going to give you this much of a damage boost right from one stat. For the other ring, we're going to be running Bold Chieftain. Whenever you cast a shout skill, its cooldown is reduced by up to 2 seconds per nearby enemy, up to 6 seconds maximum. Whenever you cast a shout, that shout's cooldown is reduced by 6 seconds. For the affixes, we're going to be running critical strike chance, strength, chance to make enemies vulnerable on a lucky hit. For the masterworking crits, you're going to go straight into critical strike chance. And then for the tempers, we're going to be running damage while berserking, and then Warcry cooldown reduction. For the pants, we're going to be running Ariat's Bearings. For your masterworking crits, all you're going to need to do is try and get 3 points into Call of the Ancient cooldown reduction. Remember when we were going over that and I said that you won't ever have to have it off of cooldown? That's why. It goes up to over 50%, plus you get all of the cooldown reduction from your Harlequin's Crest. It is a massive, massive increase to your cooldown, and you pretty much will have your ultimate up 100% of the time. For the boots, we're going to be running Aspect of Concussive Strikes. Lucky hit damaging an enemy has up to a 20% chance to daze them for 2 seconds. You're going to deal 20% increased damage to daze enemies. That's a multiplicative number, so this is just a little bit of extra damage that's going out while enemies are dazed. For the implicit stat here, we're going to do attacks, reduce, evade, cooldown. And then for your affixes, we're going to be doing movement speed, ranks to Warcry, strength. We're going to do 3 points of masterworking into ranks of Warcry. For your tempers, you're going to do movement speed, and we're also going to do lucky hit chance to freeze. The reason that we're running things like lucky hit chance to freeze, or something like lucky hit chance to slow, when you're fighting the boss, anytime that these lucky hit chants go off, it increases the stagger bar incredibly fast. Then when the bosses are staggered, we're going to get our 20% X multiplier from concussive strikes on the boss. When the bosses are staggered, they're considered dazed. This is going to give us extra damage to them, and then bosses also take extra damage while they're staggered. So the faster we can get them into that stagger state, the easier it's going to be for us to kill them. For the bludgeoning weapon, we're going to be running Dustdevils. This is going to be the strongest of all of your Dustdevils. How we make the most use out of this? When you're actually using Whirlwind, we have to be tapping the button and not holding Whirlwind to channel. Anytime that we tap the button and cast Whirlwind, that's going to give us another Dustdevil. If we're just holding, it's only going to spawn once every 2 seconds. For the affixes here, we're going to be running Strength, Max Life, Critical Strike Damage. For the tempers, we're going to be running Critical Strike Damage and Chance to cast Dustdevils twice. Because we're going to be running the Grandfather, we have to put 3 masterworking crits into chance to cast Dustdevils twice, because we can't have it on a 1-2-hander and then on the other 2-hander. For the first dual wield weapon, we're going to be running Accelerating. Critical strikes with core skills increase your attack speed by up to 25%. Whirlwind scales with attack speed. Not only does attack speed make you spin faster, it also makes you cast abilities faster. So with this high attack speed, we can tap the Whirlwind button faster, and that will allow us to spawn more Dustdevils. One small point to make about this. This has to be a bludgeoning weapon, so a one-handed mace. The reason that we're running a one-handed mace with this, we took Wallop and Concussion in the skill tree. If we don't run a one-handed mace, we don't take advantage of those 2 skills. For the affixes, we're going to be running Strength, Max Life, Critical Strike Damage. The tempers are going to be Critical Strike Damage, and then Dustdevil Size. Remember, when we talked about Fierce Winds, your Dustdevils are going to get multiplicative damage based on the size of the Dustdevils. So we're going to put 3 master working points into this, because we're not going to have any other weapons to put Dustdevil Size on. The reason that we're not going to have any other weapons is because your next weapon is going to be the Magnum Opus, Ramalama Ding Dong. This got a buff this season. We went from doing 0.4% increased damage based on your Fury to 0.5%. They bumped it up quite a bit, and that was why in the Paragon board, we took all of the max Fury that we can get. The more max Fury that you have, the more damage you do. If we are running 300 max Fury, this is going to give us up to 150% damage increase. It is a huge damage multiplier all in one spot. You will lose 10 Fury per second, but we're going to have so much critical strike chance that Wrath is going to give us our Fury back. We're going to have a lot of Fury generation. We won't even notice it. You didn't see his Fury dip almost at all when we were doing that fight. So this is going to be an incredibly big source of damage. And finally, the one that everybody's been waiting for, the Grandfather. This got a big buff this season also. They changed around the numbers. They removed the ignore durability. They added in maximum resources. Remember, maximum resources stacked with Ramaladni's. This is going to be huge. It's also going to double whatever our critical strike damage is. That's why we took extra points in the Paragon board here. That's the gear. For the weapon expertise, we're going to be running the two-handed axe. The way that expertise works is that you don't have to be running the two-handed axe in order to get the bonus. This allows us to get a 10% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. We took a lot of lucky hit chance to make vulnerable. So this is going to be up all the time. We're going to see this 10% just for having this expertise selected. For your weapon assignments, Whirlwind is going to be set to dual wield. This is why we're running the one-handed mace and the Ramalad mace. For the gems, you're going to be running critical strike damage in all of your weapons. In your armor, you're going to be running strength gems, which is going to be your amethyst. That's going to increase your skill damage by 50% because you get 10% of all of your strength as a multiplicative skill damage modifier. In your amulet and rings, you're going to be running diamonds here. So that's the build. If you look right here, 21 million damage. This hits hard, and we attack very fast. The more that we can spawn Dustdevils, the faster we're going to be doing that 21 million. Make sure you head over to his channel, subscribe. I'm live on YouTube and Twitch pretty much every night. Come in, stop, let's talk about the build if you do it. Catch you on the clip side.